Hello, and welcome to the episode of My Two Cent. My name is Paul Emerson, and I'll be giving you my 2 cent. I have another book that I might read today, and I should have. I don't know what I did with the other book. Oh, here it is. I should still have this one. So this is the one I was reading in the first video, and this is the one that I might read a little bit of today. Today. I want to start the video. It's hard to keep all my thoughts together. I tend to just be on Facebook and I see just random things about relationships in general. And um, yeah, there's like you can respond or you cannot respond, but I just see it all the time. And we're just in a really, unfortunately, really weird place in life right now when it comes to the human social condition. Like I think the goal of society is, I think humanity's goal was to make life easier and safe for us. And so we conquered nature. We overcame the forces of natural order. And along the way, we created an artificial habitat in the ecosystem forged out of our ability to imagine the human mind. Most animals build a nest or a hive to create a suitable environment to sustain their existence. But humanity, we created a hive or a nest that we call civilization, designed to sustain our existence, designed to keep the physical body alive, but we didn't design a society or a system. Hey, welcome to the stream. But we didn't design a system for our mind, right? The human mind, the human mind has this ability to transcend natural order and imagine things that are not actually rational. Welcome to the stream. So it's kind of conflict, right? Like the things that happen in nature in natural order contrasts against the things that happen inside of human civilizations. Human civilizations don't obey natural order. And to try to keep this concise, the three great ethnicities of the planet currently are what are technically four: the Acapulcos, which are the islanders, the Negroid, the Caucasoids, and the Mongoloids, and I think it's the archipelago or something like that is the proper pronunciation. I just added the term LOD at the end of it to make it synonymous with Negroid, Caucasoid, or Mongoloid. Of those four cultures, the one that is the most out of alignment with nature and natural order are the Caucasoid Europeans. And this isn't a I hate white people video. This is a who are we, where are we trying to get to, and how do we define ourselves so that we can have the actions we need to better facilitate cooperation inside of society. This idea of, in America, because I'm American, this idea of diversity at the lack of acknowledgement of individual needs and wants and desires is silly. Why do you want to be inclusive while simultaneously not acknowledging what somebody specifically prefers? It's exclusive as long as you choose one of the options that are available to you. That's the new way that society is moving into. You don't get to, right? If it's perfectly okay for Black people to listen to their music, but if I put on Skrillex, You're gonna be like, oh, it's okay if you want to watch, if you want to listen to Tupac. I don't listen to rap. Everybody that knows me knows that I'm not a person that will gravitate strongly to rap music. I'm gonna listen to dubstep or techno. I'm gonna want to listen to DJ Encore or Ivan Vandalis or Dream. Like I'm gonna want to put on Paul Oakenfold or Paul Van Dyke or Rob Dukin. I might even throw on some Nickelback, right? The idea that I have to be defined by the values that were assigned to me, and I have to understand that these are my values so that I can be a part of the society the way society says that I'm supposed to be a part of society. To me, that's counterproductive to the goal, right? You should be able to just be who you are as long as you fall in the spectrum of what is normal. And we should be able to define normal without having to get flack about it. It should be okay to say, hey, that shit's not normal here. Like in this part of hey, like we down here in the South, we do things this way. That should be okay. That should be okay. I don't have a problem with Caucasians or Europeans being mad at me because they feel a certain kind of way about me based on their ignorance of me. You don't have the right to murder me from your ignorance. That's my conflict. I can definitely just drive through your neighborhood and go on about my business. But if you have the power to destroy my neighborhoods, I'm not allowed in your neighborhoods, and you're going to use your power to destroy my neighborhoods, where do you want me to go? Where do you want me to go? Because that's really the fundamental conflict. Hi, welcome to the stream. LMGFB. So that's the fundamental conflict. Like these values of white and black, and I'm going to try to not use those terms, are meant to divide us, right? Like there's this Jasmine Crockett was running against some Caucasian male. I don't really follow politics as close as you probably think that I do. But hey, welcome to the stream. Good morning. And she's running against this other Democrat, and he's arguing and debating and fighting her, and they're going up against each other. And there's just like, she's not qualified to be a runner. She can't run, and she's not qualified. I'm the better candidate, and I'm going to get things to achieve this, and I'm going to achieve that. Hi, welcome to the stream. And Jasmine Crockett is a person in political position to do the job, right? So we have Jasmine Crockett running on a platform, and we have this other Caucasian male running a platform. They both represent Democrats, and what society has gotten us to a place as, we're arguing over, are we going to vote for the white man or the black man? And we're not questioning why the Democratic Party in of itself is divided, right? Why can't Jasmine Crockett and this other Caucasian male come together to have the same exact platform for the same exact reasons and the same exact outcomes when they represent that party, right? This is the reason why we are divided. This is the reason why Fox News goes out of its way to communicate all this unnecessary chaos and all this unnecessary disorder, and to keep the individuals from being divided. And the African American, we're like, well, we shouldn't be just voting for Jasmine Crockett because she's black. We shouldn't be voting for so-and-so just because, we shouldn't not vote for so-and-so just because he's not white. It's like, you do understand that for every election that has been made in American society, the promises that have been made to us, in spite of us dealing with racism every day, in spite of us dealing with racism every day, there has never been a candidate that has ever made a promise for us that they were willing to keep. And while I don't think that we should vote for Jasmine Crockett exclusively because she is an African American woman, I do think that 100% you shouldn't vote for the Caucasian man, regardless of what his platform is, just based on the history of dealing with them, right? At what point are you going to just acknowledge that anything's better than what has already been given to us? And if Jasmine Crockett isn't saying the things that you want to hear, it is not her responsibility as a politician to tell you what you want to hear. That's the reason why Donald Trump has taken the American people into war, after he told us what we didn't want to hear. I'm sorry, after he told us what we wanted to hear, right? I don't know if Jasmine Crockett is qualified. I don't know if she's not qualified. What I do know is that when Kamala Harris ran and we decided we wasn't going to vote for the African American woman and we got Trump, we saw the outcome. So when another African American woman, another quote unquote black woman or a woman of color ran, the default should have been we already saw what Trump did. So why should we do that again? Like that should have just been, because if you think logically and critically, that would have been the default position. And that's kind of segueing into the structuring of what I'm trying to get to. When it comes to like being a responsible adult, making good, solid, sound decisions, um, being able to, hi, welcome to the stream. I get really easily distracted and I'm quick to just go on a tangent. So I'm trying to focus my brain and stay and stay on topic. So I'm not ignoring you. I do see your comments, um, but if I deviate too far, I'm gonna forget what I was trying to say. So within the My Two Cent life system that I'm designing and I'm developing, and My Two Cent is I started My Two Cent for those of you that are on YouTube. I stream on Facebook too, but for those of you on YouTube, I started My Two Cent because I wanted to have a conversation with people. I wanted to be able to reach out to other intellectual people and just have a general conversation about science and philosophy. And the algorithm 20 years ago was the same algorithm it is today. It was very difficult to have a meaningful, deep intellectual conversation on the internet with the average person. But there are more average people, so the capacity by which I can have a deep conversation has increased. The conflict that I have is the people that are online are 20 and 30-year-olds, so it's hard for me at the age of 43 to really connect in any kind of meaningful way with people that are half my age. That doesn't mean that it can't happen. It's just this really awkward discourse because I would like to speak to people my own age, but I seem to be the only Paul Emerson of my generation. And that the framing of that and the realization of that, I realized that I'm in a really good position to be able to help guide the other Paul Emersons that are navigating this world and are trying to find their way from where they are to where they're trying to be. So that's kind of like the framing of My Two Cent. And in that, I decided to create the My Two Cent life system. The My Two Cent life system is basically a way of figuring out how to live your life based on principles of being a good, honest, decent, kind-hearted human being. Whether you believe in God, whether you don't, whether you align yourself with Christianity or you don't. One of the things, I'm going on a tangent, one of the things that has always bothered me about the Christian religion, I am Christian, well, I was born Christian and I was raised Christian, so I am more Christian than I am any other religion. That's the reason why when I speak on religion, I typically attack Christianity because that's the religion that I was born into. If I grew up in Islam and I was reading Hebrew and I was raised in that, then I would default to that. If I was raised to be more Jewish, I would default to that. But I wasn't. I was exposed to Christianity. So since I was exposed to Christianity, even though I don't identify with religion, I speak from my experience from when I was taught Christian values, right? And the biggest problem that I have with Christianity in society is that if a person walks up to you in America, this seems to be the default for Christians. If a person walks up to you in America and disrespects you, and you check them and they say, I'm a Christian, or they say, Jesus loves you, the default for Christians is like, oh, okay, this person aligns with Christianity, so they get a pass for being an asshole. They get a pass for being a bitch, right? Like, that seems to be the default. And it's weird to me that it's okay for you to do the wrong thing because you identify as a Christian. Like, that to me has always been weird energy. If you question or challenge somebody, the first thing they do to defend themselves is like, well, I believe in Jesus and I love God. And it's like, okay, if you believe in Jesus and you love God, then you should have an understanding of right and wrong. So why are you choosing to do the wrong thing? Well, I'm choosing to do the wrong thing because you insert whatever Christian value here to justify my inability to be a functional adult, right? And that's the main reason why I moved away from Christianity. That and the 300 years of slavery under the Christian faith that never universally pushed against slavery. Like, so we use the term slavery like it's this thing, like it's this arbitrary, oh, there were slaves. Slavery in America was crimes against humanity. If you go to Wikipedia, you know what? I'll be like, crimes against humanity. Crimes against humanity are certain crimes committed as part of a large-scale attack against civilians. Unlike war crimes, crimes against humanity can be committed during both peace and war and against state-owned nations as well as foreign nations. Together with war crimes, genocide, and crimes of aggression, crimes against humanity are one of the core crimes of international criminal law, and like other crimes against international law, have no temporal or jurisdiction limitations or prosecution where universal jurisdiction is recognized. I know back in the past they had a list. Okay, types of crimes against humanity: murder, extermination, including the international infliction of condition of life, inter alias, the depravity of access to food and medicine calculated to bring others to destruction of part of a population, enslavement, deportation or forcibly transferring of a population, imprisonment or other service depriving of physical liberty, in violation of fundamental rules of international law, torture, rape, sexual slavery, enforced prostitution, forced pregnancy, enforced sterilization, or any other form of sexual violence or comparable gravity, persecution against any an identifiable group or collective on political, racial, national, ethical, cultural, religious, gender, as defined in paragraph 3, or other grounds that are universally recognized as impermissible under international law in connection with any act referred to this paragraph or any crime within the jurisdiction of the court. Enforced disappearance of persons, a crime of apartheid, other inhumane acts of a similar character intentionally causing great suffering or serious injury to body or to mental or physical health. Right? Everything that was written in Crimes Against Humanity was everything that Europeans did to Africans in America for over 3 centuries. For over 300 years, this was a continued legal operation and execution of people of African descent and of people of indigenous American descent. Anybody that was not European and anybody that was not protected by Asian governments were treated this way, and they call it the transatlantic slave trade. All European nations were aware of it, all European nations knew it existed, and all European nations at the time did almost nothing to mitigate or stop it, mostly because the technology to address the issue didn't exist, right? It's really hard to stop Europeans from trafficking Africans when we don't have modern technology, right? So it's really easy to project from the present state of who we are into the past. Like, it's this, it's easy to be in the present and project your ideology onto past conditions, right? But there were generations of people that didn't even know what was happening in America. They just didn't, they were European, they were Caucasian, they had no idea. They lived their entire lives and never knew about what was happening because they were not given a correct image. If they didn't get on a boat and travel across the ocean and land on the actual shore and see what was happening, they would never know. They would hear indirect tales, but some of that stuff would be so extreme. Why would you want to believe it, right? So Europe, in my position, because I like Yvette Carnell's position when it comes to American descendants of slaves. Europe, in my opinion, is the ones that owe the African American, the debt more than America. The problem is that when the Europeans that were here, that decided to break away from Europe, when they did so, they chose, by their own documentation of history, to keep the Africans enslaved. They fought a war for free men. They fought a war for free men, knowing that there were enslaved Africans on their continent, and they chose to keep the economic structure that was already in place. They chose to justify through the Declaration of Independence the freeing of the white man and the enslavement of the African American man, because it was already an inherited thing that went outside of their control. They didn't the the 13 colonies that were born into this system inherited this evil, and they chose to just continue to perpetuate the evil, right? And like I said the last video, the war, the Revolutionary War, no, I'm sorry, the Civil War wasn't about freeing Africans. They spin it that way. The Revolutionary War was the war of, are we going to have enforced underpaid labor, or are we going to have enforced free labor? Are we going to perpetuate what the southern states have when it comes to cheap, free chattel labor of forcing human beings to operate as animals and not pay them, but provide for them the lowest quality of life? Or are we going to have underpaid labor, which is what we have right now today? They're both terrible. They're both terrible, right? But that's what the war was about. The war was always, it was never about the quality of life of us individuals in society. And in 2026, with the connectivity of social media and with the ability to communicate almost instantaneously with each other, we should be moving our politicians in that direction. Like, quit fighting for outdated, antiquated ideologies. If you want to be white, if you want to be white, be white. If you want to protect your ethnic identity as a white man, and you don't want your white women having sex with other non-European and non-Caucasian people, that is a you problem. That is a you problem. You have to figure out how you can convince women not to do what they want to naturally do with their bodies. That is a you problem, right? Your desire to have this image of who you are based on lies that were given to you and things that you were taught from a legacy that you shouldn't even want to inherit is a you problem. If you want to disconnect yourself from the whole of humanity so that you can feel superior at the destruction of the entire planet, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. I don't think it matters what group of people are destroying the planet. I think the rest of us should be pushing against them, regardless of what they look like, what religion they define themselves as, and to be able to recognize what it is to be a functional human being. That, to me, that makes the most amount of sense. And when it comes to the dynamics of the African American, this need to put us in a position where we're constantly in a state of unnecessary struggle and suffering and adversity, and adverse disadvantage in society, and then criminalize us and weaponize our desire to want to just be equal against us, to further push us down so that you can have what is my problem. It's easy to say that African Americans are not trying hard enough. It's easy to say that. It's easy to say that black people just don't want to get up and go, and they just don't want to get up and make an effort. It's easy to say that until you live in the world that you are a part of and you experience the inequality every day that you have to deal with. And when you disconnect from the fact that it only exists so that a few people at the top can live how, can do what. Everybody needs the same amount of food. Everybody needs the same amount of water. Everybody needs the same amount of space. Everybody needs access to the same kinds of resources. So why do we allow 100 or 1,000 people to live beyond what is even recognizable as being human. For what? They're in a state of denial anyway. Why do we allow that? Why do we allow these people to have millions and billions of dollars and have infinite resources and access to infinite things and not have the mental capacity and the mental faculty to organize and coordinate in such a way that the average person can have prosperity? Because the thing about it, when it comes to these track wives and all these women that are, I think the stream is paused. When it comes to these track wives and all these women that are um, preaching against, oh, women in the past, they weren't really happy, they wasn't really loved, they didn't have freedom, men used to oppress them. I'm not gonna argue the point, but I am gonna say that if you think that the quality of life that existed during the Industrial Revolution was not favorable to women in some way, and you think that the quality of life that you have as a modern woman is somehow inherently better than the quality of life that a woman had 50 years ago, you really need to ask yourself the question that Malcolm X posed: who taught you to hate yourself? Because at the end of the day, we don't know. We can't build a time machine. We can't go back in the past, and we can't ask them directly. But the fact that there are so many of us alive that are the direct descendants of our great grandmothers and our grandmothers, that it's hard for me to believe that there was an extreme discomfort for women in the context of what we see in modern times. Our grannies was not dealing with the kinds of mental traumas. I'm not going to say mental illness, but the kinds of mental traumas that we see in older women of modern generations are not the kinds of trauma that the elderly women that are passing away were suffering from. A lot of them have homes. A lot of them are widows with everything financially taken care of for them. They have to just live their basic life and do their basic things. A lot of them are comfortable. A lot of them are either married or in marriages and have children that love them and are supporting them. The vast majority of older women in society are very content with their lives. And I think that they pressed, I will say that I think that my grandmother's, not my mother, but my grandmother's generation and my great grandmother's generation, I will say that they probably were a settle for less kind of generation. And that's because the world that they lived in, it wasn't anti-woman the way that the modern feminists want to expand on it. It was not technologically advanced to provide the kinds of comfort that modern women are afforded, right? Nowadays women are like, I'm not gonna wash the dishes after no man. He can wash his own dishes. And they live in homes by themselves, washing their dishes, and I live in a house by myself, washing my dishes, right? I think that it was easy for a woman in the past to want to wash dishes because the kinds of industries that existed were not favorable to the female condition of naturally being less strong than men, right? So you think that you're equal to your grandma, but you're not. Because if you had to live in your grandma's world, you wouldn't have been able to, right? Your grandmother didn't have the same level of access to the same kinds of birth control and contraceptive and anti and like medicines and stuff that you have. So your grandmothers and your grandmothers had to be more rational, and they had to be more sound of mind, and they had to make better decisions. They really had to govern themselves and know who they were as women, whereas modern women, especially African American women, want to be men. And I'm not saying that they want to have a penis. I'm saying that modern women want to be in the position of a provider when it is not natural for women to be providers. A woman can only provide after she has been giving something. Let me say that again. A woman can only provide after she has been giving something. If I go out and hunt and kill a deer and drag the carcass back to my wife and give it to my wife, she, of her nature, is able to carve up that deer and make sure that I eat and our children eat. Something about the female condition. If a woman goes out and hunts a deer and kills a deer with her bare hands for herself, there is something in the human condition that makes it almost impossible for a woman to share when she has to do that. I don't know why, but it is a universal constant. It is universal. You can see it yourself. When women get things on their own, they don't want to give them away. Women think that men are simping when we go out and we get things and we give it away. It is our nature to go out and get resources and share with everyone. That's why women are like, you too friendly. You always trying to be friendly. It's like, no, we are providers. We provide. That's just what we do. And these women, a lot of these girls and all these females think that they're manipulating men and they're spitting game and they're playing them and they're this and they're that. And it's like, legitimately, if you would just be direct, you could get what you want. But you can only be direct and get what you want from a guy that chooses to give to you freely. You have to manipulate a guy that won't give to you freely. But the men that would actually pick you and will actually want to be in your face and actually spend time with you, if you have this ideology like you're better than them, then of course you're not going to receive because you're going to have a stink ass attitude. And then they're going to be like, I don't have to give to you. I give to you freely. But if you want to have an attitude, I can give to her because she ain't got an attitude. And that's the way that the relationship dynamic is supposed to actually work. The conflict with the African and the American is that the African American female wants to participate in the social dynamic of the Caucasian American, the men and the women. They see the dynamic and they believe that if the man was stronger, then we could have the dynamic. But what they don't understand is that African American men don't want to be white men. We don't want to rape the world. We don't want to blow everything up. We don't want to walk around on ego. We don't walk around on ego because we do the shit that we say we're going to do. It's Caucasians have to say that they are superior because they're not. Because they're not. Everything averages out. Everything averages out. Every time there is a great person, there's always that one person that's going to be the exception to the rule. And that one person is going to be the exception to the rule. Always have somebody somewhere that's going to be the exception to the rule. But if you want to define a rule like you are the mold, the actual standard, then you have to BS your way through it. And that's what we see with Caucasian men, BSing their way through life. Like Elon Musk, he is able to say anything and be anything and do anything because his status as a Caucasian man goes unchallenged. Caucasians can say that in 58 billion years ago, dinosaurs walked across the earth eating grass, and they can tell you exactly what they were doing, and they can give you a perfect image of exactly how they lived their lives and how they made it and what their rituals were and what their customs was and how their behavior was. 58 billion years ago, they can say all of this stuff. 150 million years ago, they can say all this stuff. We don't question it. We don't question it. But as soon as you ask them, why is it that we don't have enough money to fund equality in African American communities? All of a sudden, they don't have the answer to that. They're always so smart when it comes to everything until it's time to address inequality and a lack of inclusivity and a lack of universally shared resources in the world, right? Then that's when it breaks down. Then that's when they're not able to actually give you a solid answer. They don't know, they're not sure. It may or may not be this, or it may or may not be that. They don't have the answer, right? So the African American woman sees the dynamic between the Caucasian male and the Caucasian female, and she looks at the Black African American male and she's like, if you would be more like that, we will be able to be them. And it's like, but I don't want to be evil. Just because they say that they're Christian, it doesn't mean that their actions are not evil. I don't want to be evil. Can't you see what I'm actually doing? Can't you see what I'm actually doing every day? I get up every day, I go out in this world, I deal with the adversities of this world, and I make the things that are necessary for us to be comfortable at the level that we're at. Now, if you want to help me get to the next level, we can do that. But at this level, with all of the shit that's stacked against me, it's really hard for me to do anything beyond just sustaining what we have, right? And that's the dynamic. So what does the African American woman do? She gives up the motherhood and the children and the comfort of having a stable life with a loving man to go chase after the European desire to want to fulfill a role in corporate America. There is nothing wrong with that. There is absolutely nothing wrong with women that grow up as young girls, that go to high school and get degrees and decide they want to go to college and they want to pursue higher education and be a functioning member of society and contribute to society. Problem is that while the African American woman wants to denounce the adversities of the African American man and pretend like this dynamic doesn't exist for both of them, they're willing to sacrifice being a woman in the process. They're willing to sacrifice getting married and having a husband. They're willing to sacrifice having children and being able to come home to loving children and being a grandmother and being a great grandmother so that they can get a spot in careers and have money to provide for what? To provide for what? What's the point in going to college and getting a good job and working 40 hours a week to come home to an empty house and to have all of the money and have all the wealth and have all the material things, but there's no one in your home? And then your nature as a woman, you can't share with somebody that has less than you. A woman can't bring a man, this is universal. This has nothing to do with the African American woman. Universally, a woman cannot bring a man that has less than her into her home and share with him the things that she has provided for him. It is not biologically possible for a woman to do that. It is possible for a woman to help somebody on her level, but it is not possible for a woman to help somebody that is not on her level. And the conflict with women that reach higher education is that they're being conditioned to believe that they are above the average person. They are above you. By you being a successful African American woman, you are above the other men that are not also in college. But when the African American male is dealing with these kinds of women in high school, and he's a freshman and a sophomore in college, and she has this energy toward him because now we have to compete against her because that's what society has designed us to do. We're not interested in that unnecessary energy because now she wants to seek out and reach the Caucasian dream, and now she's going to pursue Caucasian men. But the African American man, he just wants to start a family. He just wants to be loving. It doesn't matter what ethnicity it is because everyone's African to him. They're all African. Any child I have is going to be African. I've been told that all of my offspring is going to be black. So it doesn't matter which woman I court because the outcome for me will always be the same. And what the African American woman doesn't want to understand is, what she doesn't want to accept is, Caucasians have, and Caucasian Americans that vibrate on this ideology, not all of them, but the ones that do vibrate on this ideology, they have an non-European, non-Caucasian policy. So you might be pursuing a Caucasian male, and he may engage in sexual relationships with you. But if he has that mentality, he's not trying to have children with you. And furthermore, if he does love you, and if he does respect you, and if he does want to be with you as an African American woman or any woman of color, he's not the arrogant, go get it, take over the world Caucasian man that is polarized against the rest of humanity. He's not trying to become a multi-trillionaire and destroying the world and burning everything to reach that level that you're chasing. He's not interested. He's just as grounded as the rest of the guys on this planet. Because the vast majority of us at the bottom that form the foundation, that are living our day-to-day lives, we don't have strong ambitions to go out and become multi-trillionaires. That's not to say that we're not trying to hustle up and be as successful as we can be. We just don't have the same ethics and morality and legality that's required to go from having a $10,000 to $100,000 income annually to having $1 million to $100 million income annually. And in politics, that's really what it's about. Like, the reason why we don't understand and why we miss the message and we don't see the forest from the trees is because in politics, it's really about the difference in the diversity of the classes. And that's why the middle class was destroyed. The middle class was destroyed because the middle class had enough power. The middle class Americans were the union. They were the ones that was like, these larger corporations want to do these things that will negatively affect me having hundreds of thousands of dollars annually working jobs, right? If you think about it, like, I'm gonna diverge from relationship dynamics for a second. If you think about a household as a job, right? The average poor person is living paycheck to paycheck. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, you're poor. It doesn't matter if you're making 50 grand a month and you're still living off that 50 grand every month, you're poor. The average poor person lives paycheck to paycheck. So low income means that you're making enough money that you have money saved every month. That's the way I live my life. I'm stuck living paycheck to paycheck because I'm getting out of the rut of when I was homeless. But every month, there is a day that I pick for every month that I check my bank account. And on that day, I should have more money the next month than the month that I had before. When I moved into this apartment, I had negative $71. My account was negative $71 when I moved into this apartment. The next month, I had a balance of $0. The next month, I had a balance of $40. The next month, it slowly increases over and over. Because if you're able to save a little bit, then you're growing. And you want to be able to grow. You want to be able to save at least twice your income. You want to be able to at least reach a point to where you can drop any amount of money on whatever it is you desire at any given time, and it will negatively affect you because you're low income, but you don't have to have that want and that desire for the things that you want. If you have a realistic desire and a realistic goal and a realistic ambition, and you desire to buy this thing, you should be able to afford it. And if you can't, you're not low income, you're poor, right? Low income is roughly around anything less than $100,000 is low income. Above that was the middle class. The middle class was people that worked jobs and had $1 million incomes. And it's weird, and I know for like the vast majority of people watching, they think that that's a weird number. Like, how can you work a job and be getting paid $1 million? Because there used to be more equality. It used to be more possible to work a job and get paid a higher percentage for your contribution to a company, when your salary wasn't based on an hourly wage, but it was based on your contribution as a worker, and you took that with you. That's the reason why they changed the dynamics of everything. That's the main reason why the world we're in right now is so vastly different. Why do you think we have streaming services now? Nobody owns anything anymore because they're changing the paradigm and the dynamic. They're making us more and more and more dependent. And while we're on that topic, the biggest difference between the Democrats and Republicans when it comes to the policies, so you can understand, the Republicans believe that, regardless of all the other BS, the Republicans at their core believe that production is profit. And I agree with that. I agree with that. You need to produce a good and provide a service and be compensated for that good and that service to make money. That is the policy of the Republicans. That is their financial policy at the core. Underneath all the other BS, that is the core financial policy of the Republican. The Democratic policy is that the American dollar's wealth is wealth. If the American dollar has wealth, the Americans have wealth. That policy only works in principle, right? Money is only as valuable as the person is willing to exchange it with you. The Democratic position is actually weaker and more dangerous than the Republican position. And just this dynamic, not in the whole spectrum of both of their images, but when it comes to policy of managing money and running a corporation, because the United States is a corporation, China is a corporation, Europe is a corporation, Russia is a corporation. The governments are just corporations that have weapons of mass destruction, but they are corporations, right? The Democrats believe that if they can convince the world to spend United States dollars, then the United States dollar will have value, and in the United States dollar having value because it is the primary currency being exchanged as a security, it will be able to be more marketable and more profitable, and people want to invest in the dollar itself opposed to the dollar actually having any actual physical, tangible value. That's what the Democrats are pushing for. The Republicans are like, if you make a good and you provide a service and you exchange that good and that service for a dollar, regardless of your nation, there is more value and more power in that. That means that the Chinese dollar is based on the goods and services the Chinese produce and the services they can provide. That is a stronger position and a stronger platform. What the Republicans are trying to do is they're trying to convince legislation and policymakers to extend the wealth and the value of a dollar to the stock market. They want the stock market to have the same physical, tangible value as the dollar. And that is more dangerous than what the Democrats are doing, because if they are able to convince legislation to allow the stock market to be as equal to a physical paper dollar bill, they'll stop printing money, and then our physical dollar bills will no longer have any value. And what I'm trying to say is that when we work a job and we get paid, those dollars won't have any value. They won't have any value because the value of the money will be tied into stock portfolios and mutual funds and interest rate bonds and all that other higher tier, unethical, illegal, as far as I'm concerned, illegal transactions, right? Like, there's no need for it. There is no need for, if I have $100 in my account, I want you to think about this for a second. If I have $100 in my account and my rent is due, let's say my rent is $1,000, I can't go to my landlord and say, hey, I have $100 in my account. I'm going to give you a check for $1,000 on the promise that I will eventually pay my rent, right? If me as an individual can't do that, then why does the bank have the right to, without regulation? I think it's acceptable with regulation, but why should the banks have the right without regulation to say, I have $100 physically in this bank and I will loan you this $100 to use this transaction for something, and I will loan you this $100 to use to do transactions, and I will loan you this $100 to do something to use this transaction. So the bank has a physical $100 bills, and they can loan those $100 bills to three people as promises to pay. So you have promises to pay being exchanged for promises to pay, being exchanged for promises to pay. being exchanged. When you hear the top 10% and the top 1% of Americans or anybody, any country that have all this wealth, that's all it is. It's a promise to pay. It's just a promise to pay. It's a promise to pay based on reputation. I promise to pay you $1 billion. Elon Musk bought Twitter based on a promise to pay. But if I don't have $5 and I go in a grocery store and I'm hungry, I can't say, hey, my name is Paul Emerson and I'm hungry. I will promise to pay you this money if you give me this food right now, and then I'll come back later and pay you the physical dollar bill, right? So that's that tangent when it comes to that component. One of the things that I wanted to say in the context of the dynamic within a relationship dynamic is there are rational and there's irrational, and there is mature and there's immature, and there's also ignorance and innocent, right? Because these are the dynamics of the problem with relationships, or the biggest confusion, is us going from being young people that don't have a sexual desire to young people that have a sexual desire, and crossing that bridge of non-consensual having desire for sex into consensual adults able to have consensual sex, right? It's that transition that we don't want to address, or that we don't want to talk about, or that society has made too taboo to address, that is fucking up the world, right? Like the whole world is burning because there's this really weird thing that happens to human beings that is not easily and readily and universally defined in a way that allows us to reach functional adulthood in society, right? And in my 2 cents, I'm trying to work on this idea of a normal, functional human being. And every time I say that, I get pushback. And if you want to comment, you can comment. But every time I say that, I get pushback. It's like, well, you can't define what normal means. You can't define what functional means. There's no way to really say what the blueprint is for a normal person. But if there's no blueprint for a normal person, how do we have abnormal? How do we have inhumane? How do we have the divergence from a standard that hasn't been standardized? We don't have the standard. We have all of the things that we define as not the standard, right? Like if you think about all of the stereotypes of African Americans, none of that is what you encounter in real life. The only true stereotype that you encounter when it comes to the average African American is poverty. But it's not a stereotype because poverty is universal to all classes. And that's kind of the point. Like the whole point of the idea of race is to make poverty an exclusive thing for just one group of people. Everyone's trying to race their way out of the idea of poverty. But what is it? Poverty is a man-made construct. It is deliberate. It is the deliberate. What's the way I'm saying? How am I trying to frame this? Poverty is the absence of resources on purpose. That's all poverty is. You don't have enough on purpose. Somebody has enough. They don't want to share with you. You don't have enough. You're poor. The reason why you're poor is because there isn't enough resources. You just don't have access to it. Why you don't have access to it? Because you're not allowed to have access to it. That's what makes you poor. How do you gain access? You need money. You need to be able to afford to pay for it. So since you can't afford to pay for it, you can't have it, and that's what makes you poor. But why can't you afford to pay for it? Because the same person that has the resources is also the same person that you have to go to get the access to the money. So if they're not going to give you the resources that you need because you don't have the money for the resources, why would they give you the money so that you can get the resources from them? right? Like that's the dynamic. That's how this works. So universally, the vast majority of the average person on the planet is in a state in a condition of poor. So you can't just look at the African American and be like, you're poor because you're black. It's like, no, poverty is the thing that everyone's trying to overcome. So as African Americans overcome this adversity of inequality, and we're trying to climb up the ladder of social inequality, we're having to do that against the current of everyone else having more resources than us, and using the fact that they have more resources to control the trickling of resources for us. And that's the unfortunate dynamic. That's the unfortunate direction that this world is going in. And like I said before, the African American male and the African American female want to fight against each other because we're not aligning with, we should be just trying to be comfortable living a life that allows us to set a standard to make sure that the next generation will be doing better than us. We don't want to do that. We want to just push against that energy. African American women want African American men to be more like Caucasian men, and the average man ain't trying to be Caucasian, and the African American woman is trying to be a Caucasian man, when even the Caucasian woman ain't trying to be a Caucasian man. Like, what is the point? So, Caucasian woman looking at the African American woman like, you got all this freedom that you don't respect. I have to be over here in this unnecessary cage that I didn't design for myself, and you have all this freedom, and I wish that I could be more like you. But when the African American woman goes to Caucasian woman and is like, hey, I'm struggling, I need help with these resources, she's like, I'm comfortable where I am, I don't want to meet you where you are. So if you could come up here to me, then we could do something, but until you're able to do that, I'm not trying to meet you where you are. And then the African American woman is looking at her like, well, how do I do that? And she's like, why don't you have your man help you get to where you want to be? So she comes back. So the African American woman comes back to us like, hey, we should work together to cater to the Caucasian man. And we're looking at her like, I'm not attracted to men. I'm not a homosexual. I'm not sucking penis. The things that the Caucasian man wants me to do to get my cut of things that he's taken from me goes against my nature as a provider. And I'm not going to submit myself like a woman to him. I'm just not going to do it. So then we get in conflict. She leaves us to go do her own thing. And then the Caucasian woman gets exactly what she had already wanted, which is access to the African American man, because she too isn't trying to be dealing with the BS and the nonsense. And that's like the dynamic. That's the dynamic. I know it's a long-winded, super unnecessary way of putting it out there, but that's the dynamic. And I say all of that because of rationality. The rational person should be working toward their best interests. Your goal should be to be content, should be living a comfortable life and having enough resources to provide for yourself. And you should be making decisions that will move you to that, right? But in the social dynamic of American society, we are willing to engage in bullshit and fuckery every day to not have enough so that we can maintain the little that we do have. And that's the conflict, our unwillingness to be a little bit uncomfortable so that the person next to us can be treated fairly is the reason why the entire country is going on a downward spiral. Everybody in America, as soon as the United States went into Iran to support Israel, every last American should have stayed home and not gone to work. We should have been like, we've been doing this war thing for a long ass time. You promised us no more war. We're not working. Lincoln Park said, we'll throw our, well, how does that line go? We have to throw ourselves upon the gears and upon the wheels and upon the machine and tell them that until we get what we deserve, the machine will not work. The machine will not start. Something like that. It's one of their epic lyrics, you know. That's what it should be. That's how it should be. But that's not what we're doing. That's not the direction we're going. Because on an individual level, we're too busy trying to save ourselves instead of actually working together in a cooperation. And the female lives in a different reality than the male, and the male lives in a reality that is more aligned with objective reality. So we make more sound, rational decisions to try to achieve an objective of providing and protecting. Whereas the female just wants to be comfortable, and she's indirectly fighting against other females without consciously being aware of it. The desire to self validate and be above other women and be superior to other women is what drives them to sacrifice everything. Every time, every time a woman that has sacrificed everything at the corporate level to be a single woman that has money and resources and is living alone sees a female that is dealing with the inequality of bad relationships and heartbreak and the mental stress of being sad and alone because relationships don't work or relationship fails, she gets a sense of validation. And you know what she does? She pushes it out to continue to try to reinforce that this is why my decision was better than your decision. There is absolutely nothing wrong with wanting to be in a functional relationship with someone. You're never going to agree all the damn time. It's not possible to agree all the time. I didn't get married to have a subservient woman that was going to do exactly what I wanted her to do when I wanted her to do it. I expected her to have her own opinion and voice and have her own feelings and voice her own concerns. What I didn't want was to marry a woman that was going to try to get me to understand that I need to be in alliance with Europeans and Caucasian and ambitions and desires when I know that they don't want people that look like me to continue to exist on this planet. So if I know that as a man and I understand that as a man, why would I be in alliance to that? What sense does it make? What sense does it make for Caucasians to tell Africans that they want to eradicate us off the planet, and for African Americans and Africans in general to be like, how can I help you eradicate me off the planet? What is your long term goal of eradicating me off the planet? How does the planet benefit from the extermination and the eradication of the African? Oh, that means that I'll be able to prove that I'm superior. If you were superior, you wouldn't need to eradicate me off the planet. If you were truly superior, you would be comfortable in your skin like I am, and you wouldn't have a problem with existing on this planet like I do. You would be able to endure all of the unnecessary bullshit that is thrown your way every day if you were truly superior. And the sad reality is that 90% of the problems that I have is a direct consequence of your insecurities as a man. And I'm supposed to have to do what? Empathize with the fact that you don't like me because you can't control women that simply have that shares a likeness to your mother. You're not responsible nor are you obligated to control the women that look like you. They're supposed to have agency and they're supposed to be autonomous and do whatever they want. If you can't convince them that they should love you for your money and your wealth and your power, maybe all of that shit isn't what you actually need. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe a lack of love is your actual problem. Maybe a lack of respect is your actual problem. Maybe a lack of humility is your actual problem. Maybe those are the actual conditions. Maybe that is the definition of what makes you a functional adult and a rational human being. Maybe the other side of that is the conflict. And that's my position. Like, I have no problem with not being qualified to be able to maintain a relationship with a stable woman and maintain a stable household. If I'm not good enough to function and to be a member of society, I have no problem with that. I don't understand why I should have to accept stereotypes that were given to me for as long as I can remember. For as long as I can remember, at every age growing up, I was told how terrible and bad and evil and violent I was and how evil I was going to be and how bad I was going to be and how I was going to murder and steal and kill and rob and lie and cheat and break the rules and be disobedient. Every fucking age that I can remember, I had people saying that to me. And on the other side of that, I was being told, if you just do what you're told, follow the rules, and be obedient, you will make it. That shit wasn't true either. I proved that both extremes were wrong, and I'm still here. So what does that say? What does it say? Because I would like to know, what is it exactly that we are supposed to be doing? It's easy to listen to what I'm saying and have a strong opinion about me, but what does it say about the state of the entire world? That everyone is dealing with the same kinds of adversities, and everyone is dealing with the same kinds of issues and the same kinds of problems at every level. This is the point I'm trying to make. It's easy to understand why somebody that is poor is unhappy. It's easy to understand why somebody that is low income is unhappy. It's difficult to understand why middle class Americans are no longer producing children. It's difficult to understand why middle class Americans are no longer engaging in marriages and maintaining stable households. It's difficult to understand why the average person in this country is no longer being able to escape low income life, living paycheck to paycheck. And it's hard to, and it's easy, it's not hard, it's easy to understand when you look at the way the currents of the world is moving, that these high wealth people are no longer working, but they're still they're still able to sustain and maintain the quality of their lives without having to actually contribute anything into society as a whole. And as things get more expensive and more difficult every year for the average of us to be able to just be functional adults, the wealthy class Americans are doing what? What are they doing? What are they doing? Because low income people party every night. Low income people and middle class people and poor people get up every day and go out to parties and club and do drugs and drink and smoke and run around and break laws and do all of the things that wealthy people tend to do. They just can't afford a $5,000 bottle of champagne. They just drink the $20 bottle. So do you have to destroy the entire fucking country so you can afford a $5,000 bottle of champagne? Like, when it doesn't make more sense for the government just to subsidize champagne so that a really nice expensive brand of $5,000 champagne can be bought at the average level for the average person? If that's all a fucking multi-million dollar corporate guru wants, if a billionaire just wants to be able to afford expensive ass drugs, isn't it easier just to label that person as a mentally ill person and then just give them all the resources they need so they can go be over there somewhere without them destroying the entire country just so they can get access to narcotics that probably shouldn't even be illegal anyway? Like, why can't they just go to their doctors and get a prescription like a regular person? Why do you need to have billions of dollars just to destroy countries and create downtrodden populations of people to overprice products that aren't even designed in a way that the consumers want them anyway? Why? What is the goal? What is the point? So I've been doing this for like way too long, so I'm gonna end the stream now, and yeah, I'll end the stream now, and then I'll do a part 5. I probably won't read the books. I think in the next video I'll just read the books. The Ice Sandman's Inheritance is broadly dives back into the Ice Age to find prehistoric sources of the white race, aggression, racism, and sexism. The author offers a persuasive argument that the white race is more aggressive than other groups, and in trading all the efforts of the aggression broadly offers an uncomfortable, all too plausible explanation for the pattern of human history. The Iceman inheritance is shocking, it is racist, but it is true. A new introduction by Dr. John Hendrik Clark, historian, expands on the finding of Bradley, citing other grave proofs that the aggression of the white race has been the cause and at the root of much of the destruction of early African and Eastern civilization. Michael Bradley lives in Canada and is a descendant of the first non-white postmaster general, Andrew Jackson Hunt, a distinct relative of Sequoian Great Cherokee Indian Chief. He is the author of 9 other published books, including Dawn Voyager, The American Discovery of America, origin published as The Black Discovery of America. Dr. John Hendricks Clark resides in New York. He is the author, editor, and contributor of many published works. Though retired by centuries, though retired, though retired, he continues to write and lecture. Clearly, scholars must consider the critical relationship between environment, genetics, and culture. The significance of the Ice Age experience of European humanity on their particular psychology, sociology, and biology must be seriously studied. The Iceman's inheritance points to the right direction. Dr. Leonard Jeffries, Chair of the Department of African Studies, City College, New York City. Michael Bradley Levels of Integrity on the description, truth, and the function of white consciousness offers us the most insight we have ever had explaining the behavior of the European community toward Africans. There is no such thing as a white person, and there is no such thing as a black person. There are only Africans on this planet. We have grouped ourselves into groups, into groups, into groups. We are groups of groups of groups and groups. And we give these groups labels and terms. And white was only invented after the Revolutionary War to explain the status of enslaved Africans that have been deemed slaves for life. And it makes sense to associate the idea of a slave with the African at the time, because if all of the dark-skinned, nappy-haired people are African, then it'll be much easier to identify an escaped slave than if all of the slaves were of every ethnicity and every color. It just makes logical sense. I'm not saying that it's right. I'm just saying it just makes logical sense. If you had 50 slaves of different ethnicities and they were always kind of trying to escape, and one of them happened to be Caucasian and he fled and he shaved off all his hair and he shaved his beard off and his hair off, and he went up north running, and you showed up 6 months later and you identified him. Remember, there's no modern technology. You identify him, you're like, that guy right there is my slave, and he escaped and he owes me a debt. And his wife is like, I've known him for at least 6 months, but he's my husband, and I don't think that I want you to take him. I'm pregnant. Why would you take my child's father from me, and put him back into slavery? What proof can you give that he's not, that your claim is valid, right? Because the economics and the institution and the legality of it was there. So he's breaking the law by breaking a contract. So it makes logical sense to do that. What I personally, from my experience with science, what I personally believe is that Caucasians bought into the idea of developed science at the time, and they believed that because they were the younger generation of humanity, that meant that they were also superior, that they were genetically mutating to be more, they were genetically mutating or genetically evolving to be, quote unquote, a more superior human, right? Because there are different species that are superior to one another, right? Like lions and tigers and jaguars and leopards. We can argue that there is a super cat that is the most superior of all the cats in relation to all other cats, right? But the problem with the idea of race is that We are not different species of humans. We are all the same species of human. We are all literally the same species of human. The only thing is that that there has been a divergence that is compatible with different latitude latitudes of life on the planet. Some humans are more compatible with certain latitudes of life on the planet, and I think this is the result of I honestly believe that humanity as a group of people, well, okay, not as a group of people, I believe that humanity as a species of mammals is much older than the claim. I would argue that 300, I would argue that Homo sapien has been on Earth for about what they define as human for 300,000 years. Homo sapien. I would argue that Homo sapien is about 300,000 years old. Not all of the species of humans, but literally Homo sapien, the intelligent modern us modern what we consider ourselves to be humans right now, our genetics, I would argue, is roughly 3,000 years old. Our ancestors go back hundreds of thousands, probably millions of years, but we Homo sapiens have been adapting and evolving in relation to this planet for more than 300,000 years as one continuous single species of human beings. Not a bunch of different humans, but one continuous species of human beings. And it is in that we get different groups of people polarized by very specific climates that etched into them a compatibility for that region. They're more compatible if they're born with those traits in that region. But that's a long tangent. Politics. Aristotle's Politics is one of the most thorough and balanced accounts of politics. It provides extended analysis of the origin and function of the state, the proper distribution of political power among the branches of government, and how to prevent such failures in the different regimes. The greatest contribution of politics, however, lies in its establishment of the fundamental principles underlying these details, the political significance of human nature and rationality, in the relation of a human good to the political good, and the critical difference between politics and economics, and the true justification for political authority and power. Aristotle Politics is a reminder that government, both in theory and practice, needs to have its foundation and justification in broader understanding of man, nature, and the purpose of political life. Aristotle, born 384 BC in Sacredon, Macadamia, Aristotle went to study at Plato's Academy at a young age. Aristotle's philosophy has shaped the thinking of writers for centuries. His writings are among the most profound expressions of classic Greek era. Whenever you read European um, books, whenever you read anything that was written in English that was influenced by European culture or Caucasian culture, you have to understand that every time you hear the term man, they're only talking about Europeans. They're only talking about Europeans, they're only talking about Caucasians. And it is a distinction that we tend to forget. When you're listening to Trump talk on about the state of America and making America great, he's only talking about Caucasian Americans. He's not talking about the minorities. He's only the whole goal is always about the idea that the government of the world, the government of America, is about Caucasian Europeans only. And the distinction for Americans is the disassociation of the relationship that Caucasian Americans have with Caucasian Europeans. And that's the disconnect. Because when he's talking about his foreign policy and immigration, Trump is making it clear that he is trying to move America away from Europe in a way that America has never moved away from Europe before. And Kamala Harris's policies were more pro-Europe than they were anti-Europe. And when you listen to Elon Musk push against the woke agenda, we hear the same rhetoric that we've always heard, this polarizing ideology of American extremists versus non this white Americans extremists against non-white American extremists. But what Elon Musk was saying was he doesn't like the European agenda, right? We're used to Americans fighting politically over resources of African and Chinese and Indians. And basically, we're used to Americans and Caucasians fighting over non-American and non-Caucasian, non-white resources, right? It's hard for us to disconnect the fact that what we're seeing right now is the civil war between Europeans and Caucasians. We're seeing another civil war within the European Caucasian, American Caucasian, European Canadian, that dynamic. This is the second civil war for them. And the first thing that they have to do, the first thing Donald Trump has to do is move the non-whites out of the way so that the whites can start fighting again. And we're just in the way. We just are here in the way because we're not telling Caucasians to go somewhere and sit the fuck down. And that's the problem. All of the people on this planet are sitting back and letting Caucasians run this planet into the ground. And even though all of the non-whites outnumber all of the Caucasians on the planet and all the Europeans on the planet, we're not telling them to go sit down. We continue to engage into the system and perpetuate their ability to have the authority and the control to make things worse tomorrow than they were yesterday. Because we've disconnected from the fact that none of what they're doing entails us other than to use us as a source of resources and power to extract, to use, to dominate and control. Look at ICE. Look at ICE. Donald Trump formed an organization to remove immigrants from the country. And who's working in the organization? The same damn immigrants that he's deporting. He said that we need to get all these illegal immigrants out of the country that are working these jobs for Americans, and then hired the same immigrants to round up the same immigrants to move them out of the country on his own policies. And if you're a functional, rational adult, how does that work in your best interest?